Line that begins with what hamafli la-asot. It's on the bottom of the second paragraph on that page. Kuf Samach Ches. It's more or less what we started this morning, but I'm going to go just to find the spot from the beginning. All right. You took the ready to get serious? Okay. Well, this bulb is burnt out. Are you okay? Should I change the bulb? You can see it. It's all right? Okay. So they're saying that oir, as we explained before, oir will give us a better understanding of the whole principle machshava akduma. And the difficulty in machshava akduma, as we said before, I can be machshava akduma or odam kadma. It's not kadma. So we're saying that even though it is not kadma, and it's a nimshach, but nevertheless it retains the quality of kadma. Why? Because it is the name of oir. And oir remains attached, connected, and remains representing the source. Mekein ho'esh. So similarly, fire. Mitzad ha'dakus v'aruchin shalei, due to the dakus, to its refinement and the spiritual nature of it, it does not mix and does not unite with the other elements. In its nature, it rises constantly upwards to be connected and united and incorporated in its source.
Or here, Aish and Aura being used synonymously?
And they're not synonymous, but they have similar nature. I mean, Aish is a much lower element than Oir, but they have similar in their own context. They're similar. Okay. This principle at Aish is Likolabim. I think we explained it quite clearly. This whole meaning that Oir is constantly rising upwards, Likolabim Koirei. Because without the mocker, like we said this morning, without the human being, a table is not a table. A table is a piece of wood. Yes.
Can I ask you a question about this?
Yes.
Related to just what you're talking about now, but maybe it's off track, you'll tell me. So in this discussion this morning of the difference between fire and keli, fire and the other elements,
Right.
and chesed and gevura, or gevura and chesed that they correspond to,
Right.
it seems to come out that fire, gevura, is higher, at least in the sense of it's closer to the source.
Right.
Usually we think of chesed as higher, or the chesed yibayne.
Yibona.
So,
That's for the world.
Chofet chesed hu, toiv, what's the expression? Teva ha-toiv b'meitiv.
Right. Yeah.
we always think of chesed as being like the highest, and din, gevura, is sort of it's the second of the spheres. It's not the first of the spheres. It's the second.
Right.
And yet placing it higher.
Right. So in general, this is, it is not in general the explanation is, the point in this is to understand from which vantage point you're looking at it. From the world vantage point, Chesed is definitely higher than Gvura. In Gvura, you become this battle, but you don't have any hamshocha, you don't have any sense of what you're in this battle of the lakus. Chesed is where you actually sense the lakus around. So, from the world, from the creation's perspective, Chesed, like I said, Elam Chesed Yibon. The same thing is Oir and Choshech. You say Yoser Oir uVoire Choshech. Yitzira and Bria, which one is higher? Bria is higher. In terms of Madriga, Bria is higher than Yitzira. And yet, we say that Choshech is a representative of Bria. And Oir is a representative of Yitzira. So this is... Go ahead.
So it's only a question of which way you're looking, milamayla or milamata.
Right.
But is there an essential order? I mean, it would seem like from the Lamaila perspective, Das Eliyah, this is really the truth. And Das doctrine is just how we see it. That's not the truth.
This is not, doesn't go into the category of Das Tachton and Das Elyon. Das has to do with how it reflects itself ultimately in Midos and in the world. Even in the person, even in the person's own experience, the seichel that he finally understands is much lower than the seichel in the inherent seichel that he does not yet sense at all. The seichel that's inherent in the oineg and rotzen is much higher than the seichel that one finally understands. We say that chokhmah, I don't know if you ever heard this, I think I mentioned it. Chokhmah, the boreg hamavlik of chokhmah is actually chitzonis ha-chokhmah. Boreg hamavlik means the spark that issues from chokhmah. It's a spark, a bright spark. And that's called chitzonis ha-chokhmah. Because it comes forth, it issues from an inherent chokhmah.
So is there a quote unquote right answer? Is there a truth as to which is higher, the oyer or the keli, the or the chesed?
Well, the right answer in all of these things is related to the principle of what is the kavana of the boy, what the kavana of atzmos.
Right.
We say many times that toihu is higher than tikkun.
Right.
And yet tikkun is higher than toihu in terms of kavanas haboyre, ha'atzmos.
in those terms, how does it come out here?
We have not yet touched, well, it would come out on here as Kalim. Kalim is the Oiris Bekalim is the real Kavanas Atzmus.
Kalim is Chesed.
Kalim is Chesed.
But it's Kalim with Oiris in them.
Right.
I mean, Kalim without Oiris is basically nothing.
Right.
Okay, I don't want to distract you more.
Okay, but in reaction to the questioning line that you presented, now that we went through this, I want to make us aware, open up, so to speak, a new perspective. Like you pointed out just now, higher and lower is not inherent in the element itself. Like we say, Keli is lower, but what is the significance of Keli? This it represents the Kavanas Ha'atzmus. Oiris B'Kelim is what is really intended to, and that's what Tikkun is higher than Toyo, but Toyo is higher than Tikkun. Because ultimately, if we talk in terms of the truth, we have to talk in terms of where is there more the Kavanas Ha'atzmus.
So higher here does not mean more truth quality.
That's right. We talk in terms of the object themselves. It doesn't talk about the truth. It talks about their madrig. Who is higher? Someone who understands what Shemoneh Esrei, what you're saying Shemoneh Esrei, and someone who davens, says the word of Shemoneh Esrei.
In yesterday's shir, you spoke about presence, that each one of the Yesodos has a presence. You recall that?
Right.
How does that fit into this discussion, or does it?
No, it does. Again, actually we're going to come to this. Each one has a presence. Aish also has a presence. But there's a distinct difference between the presence of all the other of the other three elements and Aish.
Can presence be put in a category of truth? A presence. Is it? Our presence is...
How do you mean the truth? What?
Well, no, I'm talking about... what brought it to mind is this, the kavana of the Eibishter in these things, like Oiris and Kalim is the kavana. Is presence part of that discussion?
Yes. The kavanas ha'atzmos ultimately it should be Oiris B'Kelim, which means that the Keli should bring the oil down, but the Keli should then be bottled to the oil. It should not grab the oil and completely eliminate its effect.
And how does would presence enter into that description?
Keli is presence.
Oh, but you said that Okay, Keli's presence. Do we say or also has a presence?
Okay, oil also has a presence, but oil in its presence is completely broken. In its presence is constantly drawn upwards to its source. The other three elements, especially offer and mayim, they are drawn to become more than it is. And on oil is drawn to become, to be connected to its source. And its presence is only due to its connection to the source. All right. Amen.
Just that higher doesn't necessarily have more truth to it. Like we talked about the table at some length. So it seems like because there's, you could say, concept, or there's a table above, so it turns out we make it down here. The physical thing is a vessel, a keli for the real table. So it would seem both the or is both higher and more truthful. It's a greater truth quality. But we said tonight this kind of important point about how tikkun, or the keli, has a greater truth quality. I don't know if I'm getting. It says because it has a greater intention associated with it, I guess. Tohu's higher tikkun.
No, okay. Yeah, these are things which may be helpful to think through, higher and lower. Okay. Take the mashal of table, because this is something which we can readily identify with. Okay. In table, there are two distinct levels: the concept and the practical use. We said that table, even when a person sits, two people are sitting and talking, they also sit in front of a table, even though they don't even use a table. There, the table represents a certain sense, a certain human quality. I said it represents malchus, something definitive. At that point, let's say in the Mishkan, in the Beis there was also a table. Shulchan Aponim. This table represents Malchus. And yet, we didn't leave it empty like this. There was lechem Aponim, bread, on the table all the time. You know how much all the time, how constant that bread presence on the table was. Once a week they had to change the breads. And you're familiar with on Shabbos they would change the breads. And there were
sure, like
there
racks,
were six rows upwards and two parallel breads, and altogether 12 breads. So two kohanim would come and take the bread out. One kohen would stand on one side of the table, one kohen would stand on the other side of the table. On one side of the table would be the kohen who has the fresh bread, and on the other side would be the kohen who would pull the old bread. As he's pulling the old bread out, the fresh bread comes to replace it. So the table will never be without bread.
Mm.
In other words, even if you're talking about on that level, its functionality, the way it represented in the world, this is ultimately its highest, its peak accomplishment, its peak presence.
Uh-huh. That's interesting. That trumps everything. That is the peak,
That is the peak.
pinnacle.
Why is it a peak? Look, we have learned enough over here to actually to sense it. Ruchnis and Gashmis do not combine, right? How can Ruchnis and Gashmis combine? Ruchnis doesn't even want to know of Gashmis. Doesn't know of Gashmis. And how does it combine? B'koyach mafli lasos. So when Ruchnis does combine with Gashmis, this lowers the Ruchnis. But what does it reveal? What does it represent? A supreme koyach mafli lasos, something that's higher than Ruchnis and Gashmis.
Uh-huh.
That is able to correlate Ruchnis and Gashmis.
This is brought out in your example by the immediate replacement of the bread, or the bread itself, or the table.
No, one second. Okay, I'll explain. I went too fast maybe for one. The immediate relation of the bread was brought to point out that even though there is a concept of the table, which is a high, pure concept, and even though we're talking in the Beis HaMikdash, where if the pure concept it will be reflected in the Beis HaMikdash better than any place else, and yet even there, how does it is the real milah, the real significance of the table represent by having bread on it, by showing how this is that how by bringing it, so to speak, to a worldly level. A table per se is representing the middle of Malchus, but the table, but the bread on it represents the functionality of Malchus.
Like the actualization.
The actualization.
Uh-huh. And yet, right. And yet we said if the table lands up in the desert, it's like no longer a table. It's like not non-existent as it were.
Right. Then Bichlal is non-existent. But even if it is in the house,
Yeah.
where it does represent a table, a human being. But when does it reach its peak? When it is actually used in a Gashmit again, performance.
The table of showbread. This is the oris with Kalim.
Sorry?
Is that the shulchan of the bread? This is oris with Kalim.
Okay, so the oil with Kalim in here is like pointed out, like oil. The oil would be the concept of the table, and the keli is its form that brings it down into the physical arena.
And the bread on the table.
The bread on the table. This is where the table, after it is fully present, acquires its full significance in the world. It becomes a real table in the world where you put the bread on it.
And is there something beyond the level of oris v'kelim? That's the
Yes,
ultimate.
there is something which is higher than oris and kelim.
No, I'm asking, is that the bread on the table? Is something?
The bread on the table. This is in the sense you could say that this is like mechasher ruchnis v'gashmis.
This
which is
this-
Kavonos
right.
Atzmus.
this makusha, this
Communicating?
this that then makusha, that this kavana here, seems to show that seems to not show that one is higher than the other, namely that the keli is higher or tikkun is higher, more truthful, but rather that both are these essential qualities, the essential elements to have atzmus revealed, or some kind of pele existing.
As Kira mentioned, we mentioned earlier, all four elements have a presence. There is a finer presence and a coarser presence. Keli has a coarser presence than Oyer. A coarser presence is less sensitive to its source. Is more sensitive to itself, to its mitzvahs. A finer presence is more sensitive to its source. And that's why it is drawn to the source.
In this,
Hold on. Was that the end of it?
Yeah.
So by becoming more fine, it would seem like you're more united with the source, which is more truth. But no, somehow the coarseness, the keli element itself, brings intention and truth.
We just finished saying that Ruchnis and Gashmis do not combine. And yet there is something higher than Ruchnis and Gashmis.
And that's the element that unites them.
That's right. Koyach Maflilos.
Right, but that's not to say that the keli nor tikkun is more truthful. We had that was a key piece that I'm kind of just not.
All right. The Koyach Maflilos unites in the Neshama with the Guf. This union between the Neshama and the Guf, which naturally could not take place, and therefore it represents the actual presence of the godly force, of the Mafli Lasis. The Neshama is commanded to be in the Guf, and the Guf is commanded to accept the Neshama. In that state of combination, neither one is pure. The Guf is not purely Guf. The Neshama is not purely Neshama. And yet, together, they represent something higher than Neshama and the Guf. Both the Neshama and the Guf, in a sense, become subservient to a higher kavanah, it's called Koyach Mafli Lasis. Completely superseding in their individual natures.
Who has this koyach?
The Koyach Mafli Lasis.
Pardon me?
Koyach Mafli Lasis. That's the godly will, the godly command.
But it's not just a general will. It's a specific. It's something that requires opposites to combine.
It is manifest by the opposites combining.
Uh-huh.
would any table be a Koyach Mafli Lasus? Having taken the spiritual concept and having brought it into Gashmis?
Well, in essence, there is in it that quality. Like we discussed many times. Ha'echel b'shuk doime lekelev. Everyone knows what that means? Yeah? He is a human being who would naturally should relate to a table, to self-respect. And yet, in order to do that, he has to overcome a tendency to take the sandwich and run with it. Which means that ultimately this supreme quality, supreme human quality, is not vested in one koyach or in seichel or midas. It is vested in Kabbalah soil. It's vested in the reality of the human reality, which is greater than either one. What did God create? A neshama or a guf? No, a neshama in a guf. Therefore, in the manner of speech, this does represent a yom from mafliasis, because a person has the Kabbalah soil to act like a human being. That is mitzad mafliasis, mitzad the godly presence. It's not because of the person himself. We even had a discussion that brought this very clearly. You remember we discussed, you were absent in yet, said that the Rebbe Marash asked Lahav the Goy, why do you eat? So he answered, because I'm so able to live. They pointed out that answer already represents some kind of a finer insight on the part of a goy. Because normally a goy would say, I eat because I'm hungry. Why does a cat eat? Because it wants to live? Doesn't think of life, because it's hungry. The sense that he senses that there is a ruchnische in his mind, and he wants to live, and that's why he eats. That's quite an insight. And he said, I can't imagine the goy living in Reb Marash's proximity got this sense, and that's what we said. An interesting thing that came out. I believe it's correct. That if a person goes into a fast food joint and picks up a sandwich and runs, doesn't have the patience to sit down and eat like a mensch, he's not eating because he wants to live, he's eating because he's hungry. That final element is missing. He is eating, the goof is pushing to eat, not the neshama. So in everything, we can identify this phenomenon. This is why, ultimately, it is known that in order to live like a human being, it's human, it's your nature. No, don't mean you have to have Kabbalah soul. You have to know that there is Ayin, there's a boss whom you have to obey. Without that, you'll be drawn into one direction or another direction. Either you'll go into one extreme, you become some super spiritual, or you might just collapse into Gashmis. To maintain a human form, very simple, a human form, a human presence, combination of an intellect and emotion and action on the shoma and guf requires discipline. Should be natural. No, it's not natural.
is a person to sit by the table all the time that he sits down necessarily or not necessarily?
I don't understand the question.
We say that you're saying that even people when they sit down together to speak, they sit down by the table. I want to know. I mean, and clearly when person is sit down.
Let's not take it to the extreme.
I just want to understand really because
I'm saying that table is not. What I was saying is, take the point which I was trying to make.
Okay.
A table is not exclusively for eating.
Right.
It's a human concept, a human experience, and yet it's full accomplished, full of presence is when there is food on the table.
Or people are sitting and talking by the table.
People are sitting and talking at the table. They will usually have a cup of a drink.
Or they would be learning something.
Or they will learn.
They are using the table.
They are using the table
somehow.
in some way, right?
So in this episode that you described in the Beis Hamikdash
With the bread.
the bread being taken away and put back immediately, where does in the mashal of the table you said there is concept and practical use. Where is the concept and the practical use in the scene of the Beis Hamikdash?
Also, I said, one would think that in Beis Hamikdash, if a concept is true, where would the concept be recognized most in Beis Hamikdash?
Yeah.
Right? That's the high epitome of Ruchnistic presence. And yet, even in Beis Hamikdash, the table needed to be in a state of use,
Has a practical use.
of practical use all the time. To the extent that when you have to change bread, you don't take the bread and put the other one. You don't leave the table without bread even for one moment.
Which is
Yeah.
that is related to the idea of being coarse and fine.
Right. It's a combination of both.
Mhm.
Of the oil and cake.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's not a key point, but we did mention it so many times that the keli has a certain mila, and so does tikkun have a certain advantage over tohu, and this advantage was identified as the truth or the kavanah. But all I'm seeming to get is that Orus bekelim, neshama in guf, that is the real mafli lasos, that's the real intention. Not really getting what is the big mila in keli per se, or in tikkun per se, that it is in itself somehow more kavanah than the guf. The guf doesn't. It's neshama in guf. That's the whole kavanah. Guf per se, guf by itself.
Right. So what's your question?
Why have we said before that chesed, like we started with the shir today, chesed has a certain advantage over and has a certain kavanah or truth element more than Geburah.
Because it descends into Keli.
And right, and Keli has this truth or kavanah element more than.
Not individual, not independently. Oil bikeli.
Right, then why even say chesed and the descent into Keli has any kind of truth or intention element that is greater than higher? We're making distinction. What is higher is not necessarily more truth or more intentional. In fact, the opposite. Something that's lower, namely the Keli, namely the chesed, has this element of intention and truth. And
So that's what we pointed out. That yes, indeed, there is a phenomenal significance in Keli, but its significance is valuable only, and it comes into is significant only if the Keli has the ability to accept an oir,
Yes.
be bottled to the oir.
Right.
If the Keli locks itself in and says, no, I'm just Keli. If you take this cup and I seal it off, I'm a Keli.
Right.
It's not a Keli.
So too with chesed. If chesed is not
That's a
tempted-
chesed. No, the
Right.
Keli is a chesed.
Yeah. It's
So in other words, although this is a wonderful thing, it's chesed, but it has to descend into a Keli. And the Keli has to accept it.
Meaning there has to be some kind
He has
of
to accept the oir.
the Keli has to accept the or, and that's where the real kavana. That's the real
That's
intent.
right. That is bekoyach mafli lasis.
Right.
That's exactly what we were learning before.
But it's right. But that chesed per se, or that keli per se, has the stamp of more intentional or more truthful than the oiros or tohu. It doesn't seem to.
As far as intention is concerned, it is oir b'keli.
Yes.
Then there is qualities per se. And he's saying, oir is more refined than keli. Or eish is a finer element than offer. It is more finer element than offer.
Right.
That is a very important principle in this whole thing. In other words, you could not have a human world without being able to translate the human quality in a keli.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that what? Here we have a perfect example. You take a car, and all the car is doing is going in circles.
Yeah.
We say this is an abuse. This is lowering. This is an insult to the human being. But it's possible to decay, to completely forget about the oir. Look what I can do. I can go in circles.
Right.
And then draws the human being into it, and the human being forgets himself. Says, yeah, it goes, it's really interesting.
Human world implies or and keli.
That's right, that's what a human being is.
Our world is a world of keli with or.
That's right.
It's like rain is here to the water plants.
Sorry?
Like water falls from the sky to water plants. Like the rain comes to water.
Are you going to clarify something or confuse us?
I'm trying to clarify it for myself. Maybe it's confused. I don't mean to. I want to try to understand how is this world is oil became.
Because we pointed out everything in the world has a significance. Like you said, oil became a car is an oil became.
Yeah,
what is the oil? Is the human spirit.
No, but the car, human beings made up the world. I'm saying the world is created.
Okay. An apple has its nutritious value and so forth, and its taste. It also has an appearance. We spoke about this also.
Right.
Why does it have such a beautiful appearance? What is that about?
You said it's called milk.
Yeah, that's the oil.
Saying its nutritional value is not an oil.
No, that's a physical presence. I mean, everything you can subdivide,
Okay.
but in general, nutritional value is its composition, its physical composition, and then there is appearance, which is an oil, which attracts a completely different element in the human being. this room, stripped of the wallpaper, if it had plain old coarse walls, right, with
Bricks.
bricks and wood that peels, and wood that has all kinds of different
Texture.
harsh texture, would be the same thing functionally.
You know, people doing it nowadays. You know that.
Functionally, would be the same thing. But that's not. It would not have human quality to it.
You know, people pay money for this, right?
Okay, so this is the point we're discussing. So we allowed ourselves to go into a broader discussion of it. Which points out this most important principle, that just to live like a human being,
Oh, you think? I'm sorry, I cut you off. Sorry.
one needs discipline. And here's the big point. This discipline is not that he is focused on himself, I should be a human being, but I should conform to what my Creator intended for me. The principle of self-respect for a human being, we speak about it many times. Self-respect is respecting what the Rebbe wanted from you. And if you abuse that, you are violating that principle, you are insulting your Creator, not yourself.
So if he's like to live in the house with the stripped wallpaper and stuff, like just bare brick, that would be insulting his creator.
If it's done intentionally, yes.
Intentionally, or
Yes. Yes.
Or you're talking about the people who want
People
to have
do
the,
it on the
the parent bricks.
construction.
People go take
It's
new
not
pants.
different.
People today take new pants and take them to experts who know how to tear them up, so that they would be.
Yeah, but these are torn pants.
And they buy 'em.
Those stuff, the stuff.
It's the same thing.
I don't think it's the same thing. I'm sorry. It's because pants, you make them, you destroy them when you do that.
No, you don't. You don't. They tear them up, make tears here and tears there, and that represents the, what I would say, the casual wear. The beat it. The non-conformist. It's the same thing.
All right, but I'm not.
It's
I'm not
insulting the
talking
human
about-
being. The human being
No,
is
that
nothing.
That I see.
If a human being wears decent pants with a crease, he is insulting the animal. He says, the animals don't wear that kind of thing, but I'm wearing
right,
that thing.
right.
I want to be equal to the animal.
Okay, I don't want to go there. It's too sticky.
It's why too sticky.
Yeah, because I don't get necessarily. I don't want to.
Okay.
I want to understand a different thing. What you saying before chesed, about chesed, it should come down to the world. It means a keli. What keli for the chesed would be some kind of a practical use where it could be constructive, so to say. Because
Ultimately,
chesed could be destructive also, right?
again, you're drawing us into.
I'm trying
different
to
arena
understand.
completely.
Give me example. Like, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm just asking. What would be the example?
Here, this keli,
Yeah.
this cup, is allowing the water to be in the cup so that we can use it.
That's an example for chesed.
Yeah, that's an example for use here down below. Water is a flow. You can catch water, and this way you catch water and you're able to use it in the world.
So having a cup in this world is a moshel for a oil of chesed b'kli, which is also a cup.
Water in the keli is oil chesed, oil in keli.
Of a chesed, oil of a chesed.
The keli is the chesed.
Oh. Mm.
Abraham,
Yes.
That was a really good O.
Thank you.
Really good. Oh.
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 Ah, yeah, yeah.